Talk Radio, TNT.
Right. Okay. So there's lots of elections going on at the moment. We've obviously got the big ones in the US and the UK, but we've also got a leadership election going on with the UKIP political party. And I'm delighted to be joined by one of the three frontrunners, Lois Perry. Hello, Lois. How are you doing?
There's only one front runner, and that's me. I'm really, really well. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Well, listen, thank you for joining me on the Freeman Report again. Tell us how your campaign's going, Lois.
Well, we had hustings at the weekend, just gone in Winchester, and I did my speech, and I took questions from the audience, and it was really successful. I had a really good opportunity to meet party members and to meet significant people within the party, to learn a lot more about the party and the history of the party, and to really get a feel of how important it is to the members and to everyone that the next leader really does well, because this is a really critical time for the UK. Someone needs to keep reform in check, and someone needs to keep the Tories in check, and that person's going to be me.
Yeah. Okay. So Lois, how are the hustings working? Is it are you doing that by yourself, and then the other candidates are doing their own hustings, or were you all there at the weekend?
Well, Bill Etheridge was there. He is one of the other candidates. Sadly, Anne-Marie Waters couldn't attend. I don't think she'd mind me saying that she was unwell. So it was just him and I. But the hustings are with everyone together. So we've had one physical hustings. There was supposed to be another one today, actually, but unfortunately that got cancelled. The rest of them are going to be online. So yeah, we've got quite a few coming up.
Okay, and I can probably guess the topics which are coming up, but please do tell me what are most of the questioning you're getting from party members? What are they concerned about?
They want to know what I think about, obviously, about immigration, small boats, and all of that kind of stuff. But more broadly about making sure that UKIP's voice gets heard. I think one of the reasons that I am, the front runner is because, it might be Y list, not quite Z list, but I do have a profile, and they feel that I can get the message out there. The Reform Party definitely has a big role, but they should be doing better. And the reason they're not doing so well is because UKIP members believe, and I believe, that they're not reaching working class people in the same way that UKIP used to. I mean, UKIP, when Nigel Farage was involved, was huge. It's almost, impossible for us to realise how big UKIP was. I mean, Nigel personally raised nearly 50 million quid for UKIP. It was where disgruntled Tories went. And I don't know if Reform's got quite the same appeal without Nigel at the front of it. And I think the UKIP members thought maybe I can do a bit of a girl Nigel for the party. I don't know. Maybe I can. I hope I can.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I would agree with you with Reform. I mean, they have got some good candidates. Ben Habib, I keep on mentioning Ben, but he is absolutely fantastic.
Ben a lot.
Yeah,
a lot.
Absolutely brilliant. But I agree with you. Under Richard Tice, I think there's an awful lot of working class people who did follow UKIP, who look at Richard Tice and they just see him as Tory light. I think that's a fair comment. That's just a fact.
Absolutely. And my background, I mean, it might surprise you to hear, is the Labour Party. I was a member of the Labour Party when I was a young teenager. I went out and knocked on doors when I was 15 for Tony Blair, for New Labour. I liked the whole idea of being able, to be a compassionate capitalist, which is what I bought that hook, line and sinker. But the Labour Party was in my blood because of my granddad. But my granddad would not recognise the Labour Party now. He would not. And to be honest, traditional Tories don't recognise the Tory party now. We have a uni party. And I think that it's important to have UKIP. And because you asked me before, what is UKIP's role now? What's the point of UKIP? And I think UKIP has a role to be the original and the best protest vote. We will support candidates who back our principles, but we will stand candidates and split the vote if we feel that the Tory candidate or the Reform candidate, is a bit of a globalist or whatever. We will do it. We don't care. We will do it. I mean, I actually was probably breaking a confidence here, but I'd never do that. My ex-husband actually had the agent of Anna Firth get in touch with him and say, please tell me it's not true that your ex-wife is standing for the for Southend West, and I'm not. So his mind was able to be put at rest. I'm not going to name any names or anything. So but there is a worry about splitting the vote.
Yeah, there is. And Lois, so I think I agree with you. Under Richard Tice, I think, there's an awful lot of people who won't vote for reform because of that feeling that the party doesn't stand really for working class. There's also a lot of people that have lost trust with the party as well on its stance over the lockdowns and vaccines.
Yeah.
But and you say, the party was very different under Nigel Farage. Obviously, he led UKIP. Farage is now talking about leading reform. If that happens and Farage does come back, what then is the defining difference that makes UKIP stand out? What is its USP?
Well, then we really need to think about this. And I did say this in the hustings as well. I feel it would be a very different situation if Nigel was to take over reform, and that we should look at the very least, as I said, cooperation. And uniting the right potentially at some point. But at the moment, that's just not, the UKIP members just would not stand for it. They just would not stand for it. But there's definitely a conversation about collaboration in the future if Nigel was to become leader. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about immigration, because I think that is one of the big topics that really, really concerns a lot of working class people at the moment. What are the current sort of UKIP policies on this in terms of stopping the boats, and also what do we do about some of the problems that we've got with people that are already here? Obviously, we know that a lot of 4-star hotels up and down the country are taken up with migrants at the moment. What is UKIP's current policies, and what are you going to bring to the table? What do you want to do going forward?
Well, the UKIP current policy is to basically, to treat the little boats coming over, to basically just to send them back, to not let them land at all. And I think that is a very sensible policy. But, and I know this from the horse's mouth, there's a much bigger game at play at the moment, where you have got huge corporations doing backroom deals with the civil servants and the government at the highest levels to bring over these people to work for them. But I'm not, whether it's the big supermarkets or whether it's or whether it's the delivery companies. I mean, I'm not teaching. I'm not breaking anything here. Richard Tice, actually, very good thing he did, wrote the story about the big companies having relationships at the highest level. So we need to get to the bottom of that. It's all very well saying stop the boat, but if our leaders are doing deals with the big conglomerates who need this cheap labour, then what's the point? It just means nothing. It's just a joke talking about Rwanda and the boats and all of that. Because it's
Yeah, and I think there's also a lot of cover-up going up of how much money is involved in this as well, because somebody's making a lot of money from all of these migrants, with landowners, hotel owners. It's a huge amount of money, I think, compared to France, which spends around €5,000 per migrant that comes in. We spend 50,000 here in the UK. Do you think there's a case for dismantling and maybe exposing some of this these shenanigans? I don't know what you call it really. It's kind of, I guess I would call it's a fraud on the British public, isn't it?
Well, it is a fraud, and the reason we didn't have the small boats before is because the conglomerates, the big conglomerates, got all their cheap labour from bringing people in from the EU who were prepared to work below the minimum wage, who were prepared to live in houses and in conditions that we just weren't prepared to live in. So there's no coincidence that now we've come out of the EU, the powers that be think, oh God, we still need our really cheap labour, because otherwise English people, indigenous English people, will suddenly realise how expensive everything is with all these mind-blowingly stupid EU regulations and, to do with workers' conditions and stuff. You can't buy food for the cost of what it actually costs if you are paying people £10 an hour and you're doing all this stuff and maternity and paternity and all this other jazz and all these things that you're forced to do. And then, if a chicken was supplied in the supermarket where everyone was paid what they're supposed to be paid, even the cheapest chicken in Iceland would cost 20 quid. People aren't going to stomach it. They're not going to stomach it. So, yeah, it is shenanigans. It's at the highest level. And I know this as well from a guy who has been on a good friend of mine's show, Andre Walker, on Talk TV. He's actually doing a documentary about it at the moment. He used to be the biggest supplier of this kind of labour to the government. He made hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds out of it. And now he's had an epiphany and realised that it was, in his own words, or immoral. And he's told us how it works. There are deals done at the highest level to bring people in.
Yeah.
Everything else is rhetoric. Everything else is nonsense.
Yeah, of course, and we're all lied to. The British public is lied to at the same time. Lois, before we move on, so there is another topic I want to talk about. Obviously, this vote with UKIP. When's the actual? I know the announcement is coming in early May, but when is the actual vote taking place? And can people still, if you're not a UKIP member, can you join now and still get a vote?
Yes, I think you can, but I could be wrong. But people are voting. It's a postal vote, yeah. So people are voting at the moment.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, yeah. Lois, let's move on. I know we had a big Barney last time you were on, didn't we, about the Middle East? Yeah. I think we have got different views on that, and that's fine. That's what this programme is all about. What are your views at the moment? Obviously, we're hearing about, over 1 million people were displaced when the Israeli government was bombing parts of Gaza, and they're now trapped in the northern parts of Gaza. And we're hearing from the UN now that essentially they are starving to death because of the limits being put on food and water that can get into the territory. Now,
absolutely, I feel so sorry for the Gazan people that they've got this corrupt, horrific terrorist organisation, Hamas, stealing food, stopping supplies from getting in, and keep making sure that they're unable to move around so that they can actually get away. And I also feel very sorry for them that the other Muslim countries that surround the Gaza Strip aren't taking in any refugees. The number one being Egypt, of course, which actually has a border with Gaza. So no one could feel more sorry for the Gazan people than me, but it's not Israel's fault what's going on. It's Hamas. And the Gazan people need to be freed from Hamas as soon as possible. So Israel just has to keep going. It really does.
I mean, I do take your point that, Hamas is a terrorist organisation. What it has done is terrible. It's still holding hostages. All of that, that's undisputed. And I don't think anybody is kind of cheering Hamas on. Not anybody that's sane anyway. But the reality on the ground is that Israel has been purposely limiting food and water supplies going in. That's what the United Nations is saying.
I don't trust the United Nations. I think the United Nations are totally and utterly corrupt. I mean, I don't know if you know about United Nations women's organisation took over 100 days to condemn the rapes of all the women and the murders of the women and of the children that happened on the 7th of October. I think the UN has lost all credibility, and I don't believe their figures. The UN have got it in for Israel. They really haven't. They really have.
I mean, you can make that argument, and I'm not going to get into that argument here. But you know, you can put that argument on the table. But the reality is, we've got over 1 million people which have been displaced because of Israeli bombs, and I think it's clear now that they are
because of Hamas. The thing is, war is ugly. It's absolutely ugly. But having been to Israel, right, it was actually I actually felt very moved, because everyone I spoke to there was defending the right of Israel to exist, and I thought, how awful that every single time you speak to somebody, an outsider, so to speak, you have to defend your right to have your own country. I mean, it's absolutely horrific. They are going to fight to the death, because they haven't got anywhere else to go. And if they believe that Hamas is not completely eradicated, they think they're going to be eradicated. That's the long and the short of it.
Yeah, no, I accept that. And I don't think anyone is kind of like who sees Hamas as a terrorist group thinks that Israel should be allowed to go after the terrorists. My point, though, is it still doesn't change the fact that we've got over 1 million people, which is such a huge number, that are now at catastrophic risk of, or they're actually got catastrophic hunger and starvation. That is what all the reports coming out of Israel are saying, and Gaza are saying. Do you not think that it is right that the Israeli government now declare a ceasefire and allow those people to get food? Otherwise,
do you know what Hamas have said? Do you know what Hamas have said that they'll do if there is any kind of ceasefire?
I'm not.
They've said
go ahead.
They've said that they will use the time to regroup, rearm, and then stage another 7th of October attack. I mean, look, it's not that I'm not hearing what you're saying. It's horrific that these innocent civilians are in this situation, but when you've got a government, their government saying, yeah, great, we will use that time to rearm and attack again, what are Israel supposed to do? They're saying the quicker we get this over and done with, the quicker Gaza can start to rebuild, the quicker Gaza can get a proper government that cares about them, that doesn't spend the billions and billions of dollars in aid that's given to them by you, me, the UN, all over the world on rockets and tunnels. You know, it's a horrific situation, but Israel has to defend itself. They have to eradicate Hamas, and then we can go in and we can help the Gazan people. It's a horrible
one of the things,
situation.
it is a horrible situation. Now, one of the things that I hear from Jewish people around the world is that the hate is rising against anti-Semitism and hate for the Jewish state is rising across the world. Do you not think that when people are looking on and seeing these scenes of over 1 million people, that is what is fueling that?
Okay, so number one, Hamas is controlling all of the images and all of the numbers that are coming out, right? These are people who behead babies, right? Okay, these are people who rape corpses and cut people's heads off while they're raping them, right? So I'm not entirely sure that I believe all the figures and the images and everything that are coming out. The reason they did what they did to provoke this response, to provoke Israel to have to do this, so that they could completely mess up the whole Abraham Accord, the peace deal that was being done in the Middle East. It was strategic, and it was being run from Qatar and Iran, honestly.
I'm going to have to cut you off there, Lois. Listen, Lois Perry, ladies and gentlemen. Lois, thank you so much for joining me. We will carry this debate on, I'm sure, at some point very soon. But thank you and good luck with your leadership campaign. To the rest of you, don't go anywhere. Stay with us right here on TNT.